My name is Ada, and I live in a small village in Igbo land with my husband, Chike, and our 2 children, Kelechi and Amora. Life in our village is simple but full of love. We don't have big cars or fancy gadgets, but we have each other, and that's all we need. One morning, I woke up and noticed something strange. The air in our house was still. No one was laughing, no one was talking. The usual sounds of our home, Kelechi's giggles, Amora singing, Chike's jokes, were gone. It was as if the whole world had turned quiet. I looked at Chike, but he wasn't looking at me. He was sitting on the mat, his face turned away, staring at the floor. The argument we had last night was still fresh in my mind. It wasn't the first time we had disagreed, but this time, something felt different. We had both said things we didn't mean, and now we were both too proud to speak. I sighed and looked at our children. Kelechi was sitting by the window, his eyes lost in thought. Amora, who was younger, was playing with her doll, but she wasn't smiling. She could feel the tension even if she didn't understand it. The silence stretched on, and it felt heavy, like a thick cloud that covered everything. I missed the sound of laughter in the house. I missed hearing Chike's voice teasing me, telling me I looked beautiful even when I was tired. I missed hearing Amora call me, Mama, and Kelechi asking me questions about everything in the world. But most of all, I missed the feeling of peace in our home. I knew we needed to fix this, but I didn't know where to start. I couldn't just ignore what had happened, and I couldn't pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. But I also didn't want our children to grow up in a house filled with silence. They deserve to feel safe and loved, not trapped in a storm of unspoken words. Chike's eyes met mine, but we didn't say anything. He looked away again, and I could feel my heart sinking. I stood up and walked to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, but it felt like my feet were made of stone. Every step felt heavier than the last. I could hear the sounds of the village outside, the chickens clucking, the children playing, the breeze rustling through the palm trees. But inside our house, there was only quiet. As I cooked, my mind kept racing. What had we said last night that caused this silence? Why was it so hard for us to speak? I thought about the argument, about how I had gotten angry when Chike didn't listen to me. He had said things that hurt me, and I had said things that hurt him too. Now, it was like we were both waiting for the other person to break the silence first. I could hear Kelechi's footsteps behind me. He came into the kitchen, his small face serious. Mama, why is Daddy not talking to you? He asked, his voice quiet but full of concern. My heart ached at his words. How had Kelechi noticed? He was only 6 years old. I didn't want him to worry, but the truth was, he could see the silence between Chike and me. He was too smart to ignore it. I knelt down to Kelechi's level and gave him a warm smile, even though my heart felt heavy. Kelechi, sometimes grown UPS get upset. But it's okay. We are going to fix it. Everything will be fine soon. Kelechi nodded but didn't look convinced. I don't like when you and Daddy don't talk. It makes me sad. My heart broke into a million pieces. How could I have let it get this far? How had I allowed silence to take over our home, to make our children feel sad and confused? I hugged Kelechi tight, trying to hold back my tears. I'm sorry, my dear. I promise we will talk and fix everything. Kelechi hugged me back. I hope Daddy talks to you soon, Mama. I nodded, but deep inside, I didn't know how long it would take for Chike and me to find our way back to each other. We had always been so close, and now it felt like we were miles apart. As I set the food on the table, I glanced over at Chike. He was sitting outside, staring into the distance. I knew that he was hurting too, but neither of us was ready to say the words that could bring us back together. That morning, the air in our house was thick with unspoken words. And I wasn't sure how long we could stay in that silence. That day, nothing much happened. The silence stretched on, and it seemed like nothing could break it. I went about my chores, but everything felt heavy. Even the wind that blew through the trees felt too quiet. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing on me. Kelechi and Amora had finished their breakfast, but they didn't leave the house. Normally, they would run outside to play with their friends, but today, they stayed close by. Kelechi sat quietly by the door, looking outside, while Amora was coloring in her book but didn't smile like she usually did. I glanced at Chike again. He was still sitting in the same spot, his arms crossed, his face set in a way that I couldn't read. I wondered if he felt as sad as I did. I wanted to go to him, to speak to him, but the words felt stuck in my throat. Every time I thought about what had happened, my heart ached. I wanted to tell him that I was sorry. I wanted to tell him that I didn't mean the hurtful things I said. But I also wanted him to understand that I felt hurt too, that sometimes, it felt like he didn't listen to me, like my words didn't matter. But how could I say all that? How could I tell him without making everything worse? I sighed and decided to take a walk outside. Maybe some fresh air would help me think more clearly. As I walked around the compound, I saw the children playing with the other kids in the village. They were laughing and shouting, running after each other, their faces bright with joy. I wanted to feel that joy too, but it was hard with the silence hanging over our home. As I walked, I couldn't help but think about how different things had been before. Chike and I used to laugh together, play together, share our thoughts with each other. But now, it felt like we were strangers in the same house, afraid to speak. The silence wasn't just in the house, it was in my heart. I felt disconnected from everything, even the village. I missed the old Chike, the one who would joke with me and make me smile. I missed the way we used to talk about everything and anything, no matter how small or big the topic was. I sat under a tree, my mind racing. I knew we needed to talk, but I didn't know how. I couldn't just wait for Chike to speak first. I had to be brave. I had to take the first step. But how could I? What if he didn't want to talk to me? What if he was just as upset with me as I was with him? What if he didn't even care anymore? The more I thought about it, the more I became afraid. What if our marriage was falling apart? What if the silence became permanent? Suddenly, I heard footsteps approaching. I looked up and saw Chike. He stood there, looking at me with a sad expression. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, his hands in his pockets. I felt my heart skip a beat. Was he finally going to speak? He sat beside me under the tree, and we both just stared ahead for a long time. The silence between us felt even heavier now that he was sitting beside me, but at least we were together. Finally, he spoke. "I'm sorry, Ada," he said, his voice soft. "I shouldn't have said those things last night. I didn't mean to hurt you." My heart started to race. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I wanted to tell him everything, to explain how I felt. But instead, I just sat there, feeling a little scared, unsure of what to say. "I'm sorry too, Chike," I finally whispered. "I shouldn't have yelled at you. I was angry, and I didn't think before I spoke." We both sat there in silence for a few moments, the weight of the apology hanging in the air. It wasn't enough to fix everything, but it was a start. "I don't want to stay silent anymore," I said, my voice shaking a little. "I don't want our children to grow up in a house where no one speaks. I don't want them to feel this silence, Chike. I want us to fix this." Chike nodded, his face softening. "I don't want the same fate either, Ada. I want us to be happy again. I want our children to see us laughing, talking, and loving each other." It was like a weight had been lifted from my chest. For the first time since the argument, I felt like I could breathe again. I didn't know how we were going to fix everything, but I knew that if we kept talking, and didn't let the silence take over, we could have fixed everything and continue talking. As we walked back to the house, I felt a little lighter. I could hear the sound of the children playing in the distance, their laughter filling the air. It felt like the world was waking up again. When we got home, Kelechi and Amora ran to us, smiling. I could see the relief in their eyes, and it made my heart swell with happiness. Maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. But I knew this was just the beginning. We had a long way to go. There were still things we needed to talk about, things we needed to understand. But the silence was broken, and that was all that mattered for now. We walked back to the house, and I couldn't stop thinking about how much better things felt. Chike and I didn't say much as we entered the house, but I could feel that something had changed. The silence was still there, but it wasn't as heavy as before. It felt like a small crack had opened, and with that crack, hope started to seep in. The children were playing outside, but when they saw us walking in together, they stopped. Kelechi and Amora looked at us with wide eyes, and I saw that they were waiting for something. I could feel them holding their breath, waiting to see if everything was okay. They had been so quiet for the past day too, sensing the tension between Chike and me. I gave them a warm smile, trying to show them that everything was going to be alright. "Come here, my sweet children," I called out. They ran to me, and I knelt down to hug them. "Mama, is everything okay?" Amora asked, her voice soft and worried. "Yes, my darling," I said, hugging her tightly. "Everything is okay now. Your papa and I have talked, and we are going to walk through everything." Kelechi looked at Chike, then at me. "You're not angry anymore?" he asked, his eyes searching our faces for any sign of trouble. "No, my son," Chike said, his voice filled with love and reassurance. "I'm not angry. We just needed to talk, that's all." Amora smiled, her face lighting up. "Yay! Mama and Papa are happy again." I couldn't help but smile too. It warmed my heart to see them so happy and relieved. But I knew that we had more work to do. Talking was just the first step. We had to make sure that we didn't fall into the same pattern again, that we didn't let silence take over our home. As we sat down for lunch, there was a lightness in the air. The food was delicious, and the laughter that filled the room felt like music. It was a beautiful sound, the sound of a family coming back together. We didn't talk much about the argument, but there was an understanding between us all. The silence was gone, and in its place, there was something stronger: communication. After lunch, Chike and I decided to sit down together and have a deeper conversation. We needed to talk about how we could avoid letting misunderstandings build up in the future. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew we had to try. We sat in the living room, and I felt nervous. I wasn't sure what to say, but I knew it was important. Chike looked at me and smiled, giving me a reassuring nod. "I think we need to promise each other something," he said softly. "What is it?" I asked, curious. "We need to promise that we always talk to each other, no matter how difficult it is," he said, his voice steady. "We can't let silence take over again. We need to be brave enough to speak, even when it's hard." I nodded, my heart swelling with pride. "I agree, Chike. I promise that I'll always listen to you, and I'll always tell you what's on my mind, even if I'm scared." "And I promise the same," he said, taking my hand. "I'll listen to you too, Ada. I'll never let silence come between us again." We hugged, and it felt like a weight had been lifted from both of us. We knew that it wouldn't be easy to always communicate perfectly, but we were willing to try. We owed it to ourselves and to our children. That evening, we sat together as a family, talking about the day, about our dreams, about what we wanted for the future. We shared stories, laughed, and played games. It felt like we were reconnecting with each other in a way we hadn't for a long time. The next few days were peaceful. Chike and I made an effort to speak openly with each other, even about the small things. We made sure to listen to one another, and it made a big difference. The children noticed too. They were happier, knowing that their parents were communicating again, and the atmosphere in the house was filled with warmth and love. But as the days went by, I realized something important. It wasn't just Chike and I who had learned the importance of communication, it was also Kelechi and Amora. They had seen how much better things were when we talked things through, and they started to open up more too. One evening, Kelechi came to me with a question. "Mama," he said, his voice unsure. "Can I talk to you about something?" "Of course, my son," I said, sitting down next to him. "I've been feeling sad lately," Kelechi said, his eyes downcast. "I don't like it when you and Papa fight. I don't know what to do when you don't talk to each other." My heart ached when I heard this. I hadn't realized how much our silence had affected the children. "Kelechi," I said softly, I'm so sorry you felt that way. You're right, it's not good when we don't talk to each other. But I promise you, we are working on it. We are going to make sure we never stay silent again. Kelechi nodded, his eyes brightening a little. I don't want you and Papa to be sad. I want us to be happy. And we will be, my son, I said, hugging him tightly. We will be happy, because we always talk to each other. Amora came running over, hearing the conversation. Mama, can I tell you something too? She asked, her voice full of excitement. Of course, my darling, I said, smiling at her. I don't like when you're both quiet, Amora said. It makes me feel lonely. I want to hear you laugh and talk. I kissed her on the forehead. I'm sorry, Amora. We didn't mean to make you feel that way. But now that we've learned how important it is to talk, we are going to make sure you always feel happy and loved. The children smiled, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like everything was going to be alright. The silence had been broken, and we were stronger because of it. As we continued our days, life slowly returned to normal. But it was a different kind of normal, a normal where communication and understanding were at the heart of everything we did. We worked together as a family, sharing our thoughts and feelings openly. We also learned something important. Communication wasn't just about talking, it was about listening too. We had to listen to each other with kindness, without judging or interrupting. It wasn't always easy, but we were determined to keep trying. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, I looked at my family. Chike, Kelechi, Amora, and I. We had come so far since that argument, and I felt proud of us. We had learned that silence could be dangerous, but communication could heal even the deepest wounds. Thank you for listening, I said to everyone, and thank you for being patient with me. Chike smiled and held my hand. Thank you for being brave, Ada. We've both learned so much. Kelechi and Amora laughed, happy to see their parents so content. The silence that once separated us was now a thing of the past, replaced by the sound of our voices, our laughter, and our love. It was a lesson we would never forget. In any relationship, communication is the key. When we talk to each other, when we listen with love, we can solve any problem that comes our way. And in the end, that's what makes a family strong. Thank you for listening to our story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to Storytime with African Tales for more amazing stories and life lessons. See you in the next one.